Hey guys, it's Andriatic. Y'all know what this is going to be about, so let's just talk about Mercy and these changes that we've gotten. I'm not going to explain the changes themselves in a lot of detail, just my thoughts on them and stuff, because loads of other people have already covered that, and by now I'm pretty sure you all know what those are, so let's just get into it. Oh god. So let's start off with the big one. Guardian Angel cooldown from 1.5 seconds to 2.5 seconds. I don't know what to say other than like yikes, to be honest, because when I first saw this I genuinely believed it wasn't real, because this was not something I ever really thought was an actual possibility. I will say, I think it's fair that her movement got nerfed. Like, I kind of expected it because it was really good. However, I feel a 66% increase in cooldown length definitely wasn't the right move here. No matter how you put it, 2.5 seconds is not that long of a cooldown, and her mobility potential is still really good, but the main reason I and other Mercy players have an issue with this change specifically is because it really goes against her current design. If we got compensation changes, I don't think it would be that bad, but it just feels so clunky right now because of a few things that could easily be fixed. As some background for those of you that don't know, Mercy's movement was wildly different in Overwatch 1, and a lot of what's possible today is just, it wasn't possible in Overwatch 1. And a lot of these changes or buffs to her movement came from the fact that the game swapped from a 6v6 to a 5v5. With less peel and cover, Mercy most likely would not have been able to kept up to the transition from 6v6 to 5v5, so her movement got some pretty nice buffs. However, for all of Overwatch 1, the cooldown of Guardian Angel has always been 1.5 seconds, so naturally regardless of it, even if they didn't make the movement clunky, this cooldown would have really felt weird, and I'm sure Mercy players would have complained. Now, taking these buffs into consideration, when making these changes to Guardian Angel right now, the developers stated that nerfing Mercy's movement was a necessity because of the buffs she got before, and I don't know, I just don't really agree with this. Like, I can understand when things get overtuned. It happens, and things may need to be pulled back. However, Mercy's current kit is designed around her being hypermobile because of how her beam works and the fact that mobility is her defense. Mercy has always been designed around being a cat and mouse type character, and always has been, even in the back like old mass res days. And this, along with the recent pistol buffs they gave her, which they said are for when she needs to use it defensively, make me just think that developers are just trying to change her for some reason. And I mean this in the nicest way possible, but I honestly don't believe any of the developers are Mercy players, and they certainly aren't high-rated Mercy players for that matter, because I feel everyone knows at this point that Mercy's mobility has always been her defense, and nerfing this and buffing the pistol make me just think that they genuinely don't understand this. Another problem I have with it comes from the fact that Mercy is hypermobile for a couple reasons, not just defense. It's so that she can get to her teammates in need. She is a close-range healer, after all. A lot of the reason she originally had movement was so she could ping-pong between each ally that needed help, and this actually fits the triage healer changes that they implemented this patch. But then they nerfed Guardian Angel, which is just totally counterintuitive because this doesn't fit and does the complete opposite of what they were going for. And I'll talk more about these healing changes and my thoughts on them later, but I do still want to talk about some Guardian Angel stuff for a little bit. Now, I do think a small nerf to the cooldown was fair, although I think at a maximum it should be, 1.75 to 2 second longs of a cooldown, but that's just because of how she's currently designed, and I'll get more into this later on what changes to Guardian Angel I'd like to see, but first let's quickly talk about the other change to Guardian Angel. And the other change to Guardian Angel is a speed reduction by 20% when using backwards Guardian Angel, and this is when you hold the backwards key, which is typically S on PC or on console, by pulling down on the left joystick, and then using a slingshot. To be honest, this change just feels weird. It's totally understandable and a fair nerf. Like, I actually don't mind this. My only real issue with it is that it affects super jump too, which may be an unintended bug, like, we don't know yet, which is kind of annoying. This does add to the clunkiness, but considering all heroes move slightly slower when walking backwards, it at least makes some sense, and is something I totally could adapt to over time. I just prefer it if they either stated it was intended to affect super jump too and fix that bug, because it feels really awkward on jumps when the meter is not charged much at all. My main other issue with this change is how it affects people with slow sensitivities, or more specifically, console players with slow sensitivities. The one nice thing about this change is nothing is stopping you from just doing a 180 and doing a normal slingshot, where you'll get the full speed and momentum. However, this is something that's not always viable to people with lower sensitivities. And as most of you know, I play on both console and PC, and as someone who plays both platforms, I'm always looking out for what kind of things may affect people on console, differently, and this is certainly one of those things. I actually recently made a collaborative video with a fellow Mercy content creator, Skiisty, and in that video, one of my tips for console players was that it's really beneficial to utilize Reverse Guardian Angel more, as it can be quicker than having to 180 if you don't play on a high or maxed out console sensitivity, and I almost feel like that's like somewhat irrelevant now because this nerf has come into play. And I'm not going to say something stupid like, oh, revert this change for that sole reason. Like, it honestly doesn't affect me that much personally, because I use a really high sensitivity, and I use an even faster sensitivity on PC. But I just can't help but feel that's just a little unfair to those who can't handle a fast sensitivity, or, you know, on both platforms, because there are certainly people on PC who probably can't 180 quick enough to make it reliable. But that's just my opinion and my perspective on the matter. As an overall, for all the Guardian Angel changes, I just can't say I'm a fan. I definitely would like to see a revert, or at least a max of 2-second long cooldown for Guardian Angel, or I'd like to see some other changes that may fix the clunkiness we're currently experiencing. A lot of the clunkiness comes from how this removes a lot of the synergy Guardian Angel has in other aspects of Mercy's kit, as I've stated. For example, Mercy's beam disconnects when she moves out of its max range or breaks LOS for more than 1.3 seconds. So a common tactic for playing at max beam range many Mercy players have adopted was to play at max beam range or just out of it, connect your beam, do a small Guardian Angel forward and then backwards, which allows you to come in and out of the max range and allows you to safely play at the max distance without having to worry about your ally walking farther or out of range or out of LOS, and you can adjust your positioning with each new Guardian Angel. Instead, now you have to try to do this, your beam can become disconnected for much longer periods of time, and you're often just finding yourself playing closer to an ally and saving Guardian Angel as an escape measure, and this becomes especially prevalent when playing with mobile heroes. Like, this is my own personal opinion, but I've always thought that a good Genji was the most fun hero in the game to pocket, and now, playing with Genji makes me want to rip my hair out and not even want to bother because his blades are so much less reliable to pocket since he gets dash cooldown resets, and it's to the point that you just basically can't even really pocket him that reliably unless you're using Valkyrie. Another part of the clunkiness has to do with res, which, like, yeah, the community complained about res, and I guess this is sort of a nerf to it, but, like, this just feels like garbage. Res's cast time is 1.75 seconds, and with Guardian Angel's old cooldown of 1.5 seconds, this meant you could fly in, res, and then fly out after the cast was over. Now you have to wait almost a whole second after res in order to Guardian Angel out, which just feels awful. Like, this definitely adds to the risk factor of res, which is fine, but it just feels so clunky for absolutely no reason at all. This effectively makes res's cast time 2.5 seconds if you wanted to look at it that way, even though the cast is still 1.75 seconds long. It's just you're unable to really move for another 0.75 seconds. This also makes techs like Super Jump Res pretty much near useless because a lot of people use SJ Reses for higher risk Reses, and if you're going to go for that and just be stuck for an extra second, you may as well not even attempt it. Of course, they still look cool and are good for positioning on certain high grounds, so they do have some uses. It'll just be way more niche. If Guardian Angel is going to remain a 2.5 second long cooldown, which, oh my god, I hope it doesn't, or if you get its cooldown reduced but it's still higher than 1.75 seconds, I definitely feel like we should bring back Guardian Angel cooldown reset upon successful reses. This would essentially mean that if you get a res off, the cooldown of Guardian Angel is refreshed so you can use it after. And I'm also going to make a point to mention successful reses, because I feel like if this was the case, where Guardian Angel's cooldown was longer than res's cast, that if you go for res and get booped or stunned out of it, you should get punished by not getting your cooldown reset, and that a successful res would reward you with the reset of the cooldown. Now, that could actually be a pretty cool tech because of, like, the difference between 1.75 seconds and 2.5 seconds. Like, imagine going for a really risky res just because it would make Guardian Angel's cooldown lower. Like, that would be kind of crazy. Anyways, finishing up with Guardian Angel, the take home from me here though is, like, her movement isn't bad. Good Mercies will still be basically unkillable. She's very positioning focused and always has been, and it's just more so now. The reason most Mercy mains hate this is because it feels clunky, slow, and it's just overall a pain to use, and that's like the complete opposite of what my mind goes to when I think of Guardian Angel, so using these words as a descriptor for it just feels so wrong to me. I think if we lower the cooldown, or at least have compensation buffs in the form of longer timer between your beam and when it breaks, and adding a cooldown reset upon successful reses, it honestly probably wouldn't feel that bad. As well as removing the speed decrease from backwards Guardian Angel and Super Jump, or maybe just changing so that the speed decrease only applies when the meter is, say, below like 50% power, I don't know. And luckily, it is pretty easy to play around. You do need to be more wary of your positioning and how you use Guardian Angel, but techs like Bunny Hop and Sling Hop are going to be much more important now than before, as they allow you to retain some movement after you've cancelled Guardian Angel, which will increase your overall agility, especially Sling Hop, as it allows you to use directional Guardian Angels as well. Cancelling Guardian Angel early will also be helpful in some situations for the same reason. Alright, so that was already a lot longer than I planned to talk about, so let's just quickly talk about the healing changes. This won't be nearly as long, but I do have some points I want to make. So, to quickly begin with, these healing changes just essentially make it so that Mercy's heals are weaker, but she heals more when allies are below 50% HP. And this buffed healing for critical allies actually puts her healing at a higher rate than it was before the changes. This is basically just a slight rework to her healing and makes it so that she's better at saving critically injured teammates and is better to push damage boost while people are hurt rather than constantly topping people off. I think this change is pretty interesting, but a lot of non-Mercy players think it's really unfun to play against, which is kind of fair. I can understand how it's annoying to play versus trying to go for a kill and suddenly Mercy just does way more healing. It's frustrating. It actually makes it so that some heroes literally can't ever kill someone while Mercy's healing them, like Winston for example, because he only does 60 DPS. This change also affects Valkyrie, which does a base healing of 60 HPS, and with this change, crit allies are healed for 90 HPS, which is crazy. I actually really like this, because it makes Valkyrie feel like it does something more. Like, I feel like I can be using Valkyrie in way more situations now, and it actually feels good to use defensively, which is something I've always wanted out of Valkyrie. However, because of this frustration with the heal changes, I think it would just be best to revert the base beam back to the constant 55 HPS, and then keep these healing changes in Valkyrie only. I feel that because Valk is an ultimate, it should be able to have this nice little buff, and this also makes it so that her pocket ability isn't too strong outside of Valkyrie. As for the healing changes overall, that's pretty much all I have to say about them. I think it's creative, I think they're cool, I just think they're really random. The goal of this change was to make her quote-unquote a triage healer, where she'd bounce around to low HP allies, saving them, and then focusing on that rather than topping people off. But then they nerf Guardian Angel to the ground, which counters this idea and just makes her a stronger pocket support, which is the exact opposite of what they were going for. And also, there's the passive change. I don't have a lot to say about this. Basically, it just makes it so that your health regenerates when you're healing someone. And this is one of those things that's really interesting, but it either feels overpowered or absolutely useless depending on the situation. I don't mind this. I can't lie. I prefer the normal regen because it was at least consistent, and I also hate that as a byproduct of this, regen and Valk is gone, but otherwise, I really have no opinions on that. Overall, for all these changes, I'm going to rant for another minute. Sorry, but that's why you clicked on the video. I think these changes, or at least the combination of them, are weird, because it makes me wonder what the developers' priorities are. The community has been complaining about damage boost and res for a while now, and instead, they decided to buffer healing and nerf Guardian Angel to the ground, and literally no one asked for either of these. I don't know who they're listening to. I don't know how they managed to piss off both sides of the community, Mercy mains and non-Mercy players, by literally addressing nothing that was complained about, while then making the problem worse by making Mercy clunky and unfun to play. I knew Mercy changes were coming, and I was kind of excited to see what kind of rework we could have gotten, and instead, I feel like jumping off a cliff because I got the fun part of my hero's kit taken away, while making it so that people complain even more about the issues she had before, as if I wasn't already tired of hearing it. I'm open to keeping these sort of changes and working with them, but they cannot stay in the game as they are now. And I know Mercy mains have a reputation for being crazy or insane, and yeah, you can take one look at the forum posts, and that totally proves it, and I'm sure I'm getting lumped into that by expressing my opinion on these changes, but that sort of stereotype is not going to stop me from talking about what I think should be done to this hero. I like to think I'm pretty fair with my ideas, and I know the devs aren't watching my videos and taking what I say into consideration, and I don't expect them to because they hate me because I'm a console player for some reason, but I still feel as a Mercy content creator, this is just something I felt the need to address. I just don't really think this is the right direction we want to be taking Mercy, and I think most Mercy players and non-Mercy players would agree with that, considering literally none of the issues that were complained about were addressed. Anyways, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed my little rant and my thoughts on changes and what I thought would be good, fair changes so far. I decided not to address rework ideas outside of what's been changed, such as res and damage boost, because that's honestly just a whole nother topic and a whole nother video. But that's all from me. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.